every second Saturday of the month, kick-starting on the 14th. So register on Eventbrite. It is a community chat about, so come and find out what we're going to be chatting about. Are you joining us on that day?
Yes, I'll be there, definitely. I've got something to chat about. I've got a lot to chat about.
Nice. So, guys, stay tuned in to the regular shows to find out where we're going to be showing up. We've got some other events coming up also. So, Big E, I don't think I've done anything new.
Anything
for the first time. I'm sure there's something new, but I haven't really got anything to report about. I don't know if there's anything that you...
I think the last time I've done something for the first time, say it again.
When was the last time you did something for the first time? Have you been living?
That's probably one day last week. I slept for 6 hours.
Wow. Do you know something? That is needed, because sometimes I feel like I have to bank sleep.
I'm telling you.
I'm going to put out some sleep for next week, because there's no time this week, and that is all actually about good health. All of that is about
6 hours uninterrupted.
Tell us quickly though, E, about something it's not the first time you've done it, but you've been doing something that's quite beneficial and you seem quite excited about it. It's the class. Can you tell us about that?
I've actually tried to see if I can get my friends to come and talk about it. I've been doing a thing called Beatbox. It's basically a boxercise class, but it's a boxercise class for drum and bass. And the instructor, he MCs at the same time while he's calling out all the combinations that you've got to do to these bands. So the setting is you're in a room with about, say, 15, 20 people, 4 people per bag, and as the beats are going, and it's interaction as well. So people with horns, whistles, and you even get the ollie, 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 oi, oi, oi. We do all that, and it's a real fun workout to do. And I've been doing it now for about 4 weeks, and the benefits are good because when you're sweating, it's a proper workout. So anyone who's interested and enjoys a boxercise workout, hit Blaze up, and then after we'll give you some information.
Is it one of those things where beginners can join as well, or we can?
It's for beginners, intermediates. You go at your own pace. You're not forced to do anything that you can't do or what you're able to do. So yeah, just let him know what your issues are, whatever, and he'll help you out with it. But it's a really, really, really good workout.
Cool. So guys, if you want to get fit, if you want to say some get down there, get fit, and look after yourself. Because actually, it's also good for mental health as well. Physical health and mental health.
Yeah.
And this month actually is men's mental health. And they say often men, suffer in silence. And I always wonder, what do men talk about in the boot room? Do they just talk about the latest TV? Do they really talk about stuff? Because women, we talk about all kinds of stuff in our changing rooms or in our gatherings. And I wonder often, what do men...
It's another talk show, isn't it?
It's another talk show. We can do that one.
Yeah.
But let's just think of men to our brothers, uncles, dads. Let's be good to them. Even if, just this month, let's celebrate our kings, because that's a wonderful thing to do. Okay, guys, so as we say, it's Let's Talk Show. Anything can happen. And today, for some reason, I'm getting no internet connection, so there isn't any music at this stage, but I do have a wonderful playlist lined up for you. But what we are going to do is we are going to just kickstart off with our first guest. Now, I have been working for 30 plus years in corporate, in children and families, until I decided some years ago, actually, I'm just going to go to Barbados, and then after Barbados I'm going to go to Jamaica, and after that I thought I'd never go back to work full time again. But I do understand, and I do remember my days of working sort of 9 to 5 in that industry. And what I love about our first guest is that, for me, I struggled a lot, I think mainly with the cultural aspects of it, or lack of. And there were times when I had to make some decisions that my work colleagues would be making differently because they didn't have a cultural understanding of how we, as people from the Caribbean, from Africa, how we raised our children. And something simple which really stood out was when they were talking about children sleeping in the same bed as their grandparents. And for lots of us, we were sleeping in our grandparents' bed for ages. It was a thing that we did. We were raised by our grandparents. Alarming. but I found it quite challenging dealing with the differences in culture. That was one of my things. I mean, there was many things I loved about the role, but I did find that quite something. So I'm fortunate that people share WhatsApp messages and all kinds of things to me and give me information and food for thought. Now, when this information was shared, I mean, as soon as I got to the bottom of it, I was like, this individual is amazing. And I'd really love to have a conversation with her here on the Chalk Hill Community Radio Station, Let's Talk Show Live. And then when I started going into it, I was like, oh no, this might be 2 shows. So guys, this might well be part 1. But my interview today is with Dr. Arlene P. Weeks. And with over 30 years of experience in social work profession, Arlene has held many roles, including a probation officer, leaving care team manager, child protection chair, fostering and adoption, and I mean just so much more. So I'm going to now say good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Show to Dr. Arlene. Do you want to call you Dr. Arlene? Or do you want to call you Arlene?
Arlene is good.
So we're going to say good morning to Arlene. So Arlene, good morning and thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm really interested in having this conversation as well, because I think some of the things you've just touched on really resonate with me.
And isn't it funny sometimes, we get up, we go to work, we go home, we get up, we go to work, we go home, and sometimes we don't really remember all of the work that actually we've done in that space of time. So I always kind of want to know who the character is, who's the person behind all the wonderful things that you do. So tell us a little bit about your background, sort of your cultural heritage, where you were born, that kind of thing.
Okay, so I am the first of 4 children to a Bajan mum. And you just talked about being raised by your father. I was raised by my mum with almost non-existent contact with my father. And that for me is quite significant in terms of what I write about, where I position myself. So
that's great. So I'll tell you that people say I'm Bajan by association, right? Because I was adopted by a wonderful Bajan family who co-raised me with my dad. So I have a lot of being part of who I am today. And you're right, because I understand that when we go into your book, you're talking about the thing that I say, we are who we are because of who we were, where we come from, all of those influences. So, but you were born in the UK, did you say?
I was born in the UK.
Yeah. Okay. And have you frequented Barbados? Have you been back? Have you?
Yeah, back then, you didn't go to the Caribbean because we couldn't afford to. So my first trip to Barbados was when I was 18. I'd actually gone to America to see my mum's older brother before going to Barbados.
Oh, nice.
And as I got older, we went and we took my mum often, and we would go as a whole family. So we would rent a house or 2 and descend on Barbados, usually around Christmas, which the kids laughed because it's Christmas in the sun on the beach. So it was a really different experience. So yeah, and I made a point. My husband died this year, 6 years ago, and I made a point of actually getting my citizenship. I did have it when I was a kid, because my mum was about to send me back to Barbados with her mum in order that she could make a way, but she didn't. But I have this kind of feeling that, well, I've always had this feeling that my mum raised us with make sure your papers sorted. Just in case they say we need to go. So I made a point of making sure I've got my Bajan citizenship, so if I need to, I can get out of these people's countries.
I was thinking about that. I keep talking to my sister about that, about getting my dual heritage, because my birth family are from St. Kitts and Nevis. But of course, we are all, of course, Africans. I refer to myself as unapologetically African, but that's the trajectory to how I ended up here. So you were raised, you're saying, aspects that because then I went on to have about 5 different mothers. One showed me how to make bake, someone showed me how to make cornmeal porridge. So I had all of this variation. So for you, how do you think that has shaped you? Because you mentioned that at kind of really early point in the conversation.
I suppose, though, I wanted to caveat that is that I had male figures around me. So, as you said about us sleeping in the same bed, remember when our parents came to this country, they slept in the same house. Yeah. So I was with my mum's cousin, who's older than us, and he had 2 children, so I raised calling him Daddy, although he wasn't my birth father. So I was with my mum, and then from 5 to 9, I was raised with my daddy.
Yeah.
So it's not that I was without a male figure.
Yeah.
I think that that's important to contextualise that this whole thing that nowadays, unless somebody's living in the house with you, you say you don't have male role models or female role models. I think that's rubbish. And also, if you go back to sort of absolutely fantastic dads, and I think we kind of need to look at this whole idea of separateness, because it's very, for me, Eurocentric idea of how we're raising and being raised by.
Struggle with that. People still say to me, because you've got a lot of cousins, because they don't understand the concept that everybody's your aunt, right? And so therefore everybody's your cousin, or your brother, or your sister. So what does that feel like for you, Biggie, when you hear the conversation that you started the show with about?
I mean, even the part where she's talked about, it takes a village to raise a child. I mean, a quick, well, not incident, but one time when I was in Grenada, and a friend of mine, he had a younger son, and he must have been about 5, so it was sort of starting to get dark. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and I was like, I said to him, "Where's your son?" He said, "I don't know. He's playing somewhere." He said, "So don't worry, someone will drop him off in a minute." So like 15 minutes later, someone walks up, "Oh, Mr. So-and-so, I found Klinsman down the road," and they dropped him off.
Yeah.
And I was, and that's the sort of thing we don't get here anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't get the sense of community, and with the internet and stuff like that, everybody now see a community as being social media.
Yeah.
Whereas before we were out, you know what I mean? You were out playing and stuff like that. And we don't
All
do that.
day.
Yeah, all day long.
Just go home for dinner, innit?
Yeah, all day long. You know what I
Somebody
mean?
else will feed you.
And
There's that joke though where people say, if once you go out of your house,
you won't come back in.
No, if you were thirsty or needed to go to the toilet, you go and you ain't coming back out. They say, you're inside, stay inside. So you'd probably go to someone else's house and use their toilet. So community is a really big thing, and we're going to be talking a lot about that later. So what was it then, Arlene, that directed you to working in a social work setting? What was that?
Okay, if I'm honest, I wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay.
I didn't want to be a social worker. Well, I didn't even know what social work was.
Yeah.
So, but back then, if you didn't pass your A-levels first time, social work was just...
The thing.
Yeah. Because, in my view, you asked me, what do I want to be called? I'm a doctor of social work, but I'm Arnie. Yeah. I'm working class girl, single parent, and you didn't pass A-levels first time, so I had to do them again. And I was thinking, what's the nearest to law? And then I went into probation. But when I trained in 1986, it was a generic qualification that meant you could be a probation officer or a social worker.
Oh, wow.
So I went into it being a probation officer in Brent. And then I ended up being in social work, which I had actually vowed that I would never do. Because I didn't want to, again, when you talked about culture, I never wanted to remove anybody's children.
Yeah.
So the idea of working in social work is like, no, who's taking somebody's children? Because again, in terms of our particularly Caribbean heritage, which I know, and what you said about the street, is that you wouldn't adopt, you wouldn't foster somebody's child, you're looking after them.
Yeah.
You don't take away people's heritage. Whereas the Western culture is very much, particularly UK, is that you adopt them, you put them into somebody else's home, and you forget their legacy, you forget their heritage. So it was nothing that I wanted to go back into. But dare I mention her name, Maggie Thatcher. When I wanted to get out of the prison where I was working,
She gave me said, wait a second.
No, where I was working. Well, it did feel like time, if I'm honest. I felt like I was being locked up with the young boys because I worked at Felton Remand Centre. There was no probation jobs because she was changing probation. So I went into the youth offending service, and then I went into social work, probably nearly 10 years later. So that's how I ended up in social work.
Fabulous, because I set off, I wanted to be a teacher first of all, and because I was a bit forthright, I wanted to do everything kind of like now. And they said, well, you need to be this age to do this and do that. So I ended up doing nursery nursing and didn't really want to do social work, but ended up working in a nursery in Stonebridge. And I'm glad about that because we're going to talk about the connection of our guests later in Stonebridge. In the centre of Stonebridge, and it was a social services nursery back then. So therefore I was connected with social workers making sort of like decisions about the children that were in that centre, predominantly African children, of course, African Caribbean children. All of the staff were white Caucasian, apart from the cook, the cleaner. And I found this quite profound. All the books were, I think, can I say the type of books? Anyway, they were non-African books, just in case a ladybird or someone comes after me. They were non-African books, and I decided I was going to go and make this change. So at that time, and that probably was the 80s, and I found it so difficult because they just didn't understand the concept. So I'm super excited that you have written, because we're going to talk about your book, because you're an author also, that you have written this book, because it is where we come from, it is who we are, it is our thought processes that allow us to make decisions. And we are making decisions about people's lives, right? Because people have said to me to be a magistrate, but I don't know about people's children, but people say go in and make a change. But that is because we have individuals like yourself who are strong enough, because I think it's about strength, and who are brave enough to say, actually, I'm really going to talk about something that is real for me. So when you've gone into probation now, you felt like you've been locked in. I know I've done Holloway Prison as a worker. You felt like you've been locked in. You've gone on to social work. What were some of the challenges that you faced about decisions that you might have had to make, or people making alongside you? You know, the team around the child and all that stuff.
I mean, it's interesting you say I'm a strong person, because I'm going to be honest, I don't think I have had any challenges, okay?
Really?
Because I came from this woman who, when she came here, worked in a button factory and asked to go to the toilet, and they said she couldn't go to the toilet, and my mum took her bag and walked.
Yeah.
So I come from that kind of strength, where if you're, I believe in, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to ask, I'm going to inquire, but if there's a point where you're not listening, I'm ready to walk. Yeah, there's 4 of us, and we always say that we've taken a bit of my mum. My youngest brother, I know he's going to be listening, he's the warrior type like my mum. Yeah, you know, he's going to have to fight if he needs to, whereas I'm going to talk my way out of things. So I come with a real sense of my positionality, whether it is I'm making decisions about young people, I'm a lecturer, or even in my family. This is my view, this is the wisdom I bring. Kind of take it or leave it. And so from the very early stages of my career, I'd say, this is what we need to be done. Somebody gives me a different view. I'm not saying that I won't listen to it, but you're not going to change my view. So I remember more latterly in my career, a manager was yonder talking, and I got quite good hearing. And I kind of thought, I couldn't remember what the case was. I couldn't hear the name of the case, but I could hear them talking about one of my cases. And the manager came over to me and said, I need you to close that case. And I said, hold on a minute, I know what you're like. So I pulled up the case on the computer and I went through it, and I said, not going to change that case, but if you want to instruct me as a manager, go ahead. And they obviously are not going to instruct me because they know what they're doing is dodgy. And about 3 months later, we actually removed the child. And I just thought to myself, good thing I didn't pay any attention to you.
Yeah.
But I am that person. Yeah? If you're going to put it in writing, then I'm covering my back that you put it in writing and told me. But what often happens, and I see with the younger generation of social workers, they're really governed by their manager said. Yeah. And my mum raised me is like, stand in your decision. And she tells you, line don't drop far from the tree. Apple don't drop far from the tree. So I am really strong in that. I'd rather leave my job. I've had managers say to me, you have to do this. And I was like, okay, bang, 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 my resignation. And they're like, where are you going? I don't know. Yeah. But what I know is you ain't going to ask me to do it. And it's like, oh, will you take back your resignation? It's, yeah, I will take it back. But you can't instruct me to do something that my core says not to do. That is never going to happen.
Would that be part of your job description, or they just decided to ask you to do
It is
something?
always part of your job description in
Yeah.
terms of hierarchically, but they don't often want to put it in writing that they
Right.
said that.
Okay.
So if we think about children like baby P and what that,
Yes.
yes, we look at the social worker, and the social worker is the one that they blame, but no decision is made in social work without the manager.
Right.
But the manager often doesn't put pen to paper or type on, and so the social worker falls.
Right.
Because also there's this little caveat, right, at the bottom that says, they give you the specification, and then it says, and anything else that you're asked to do.
All other
like,
duties.
Yeah, all other duties. Then why even do the bullet points? Because then you fall into that space of, and do you know, when I was in Jamaica at that time when I was trying to work out what to do with my life, I met someone out there, I met this Rasta man out there, and he spoke about tribes, like people being in, you know, coming from, although not born of the same womb, but being of the same ilk. And we must be born of the same ilk, because what it is that when you have that mindset, you know that even if you don't know where you're going, you know you ain't staying there, and everything could be fine, because you know you always think about when X happens, especially with social work, when that story hits the you know the front page, what is it going to say under my name?
Absolutely.
And what would I have done? Will I go away feeling satisfied? And that is why I think your cultural influences is so important. That's why I think culture is so important, because our parents came here to this strange land to pave the way. And sometimes when I think about how old they were, you know, when they came over, the treatment they had, I cry, like proper cry, not just cry metaphorically, I actually cry. Because they went through so much. So therefore, when it's given to us, and the likes of our guests that we're going to be talking about later, when it's given to us, to you, myself and E, and we feel this duty, or this innate ability to carry on the work that they've done, it's sometimes not easy.
It's challenging, isn't it?
It's challenging,
Yeah.
but let's talk to you today now about something that you refer to. I mean, I love it, as EPPJ. Talk to us about that.
So it means effective personal and professional judgment. And when I was
Effective personal and professional judgment.
And when I was writing my PhD, it was just something that landed. I hadn't written the rest of the PhD, but it just landed. And what was the sense of it was for me is, how do we become effective in what we bring personally in terms of applying it to our professional judgment?
Love it.
And somewhere in the book I also talk about this idea that we're non-judgmental, and I say that that's a fallacy. Yeah, we walk around and we're constantly making judgments. So I don't know how we're in a profession that we say we don't make judgments.
For sure.
What we should be doing is not discriminating, but we need to sort of own that we're constantly making a judgment. And there's an example I give in the book about, as a woman, if I'm walking down the street and I hear footsteps, I start to make judgments. Do I cross over the road? Do I pretend I'm on my phone? Do I start running? Do I let the person pass me? If it's a man, do I stop and sort of let him pass me because I'm worried, because I'm a female? And all of that is okay because I'm keeping myself safe. The problem comes is when I turn around and I call him a rapist. I don't know him. Yeah, he's just running to get his bus. Yeah. And for me, that's the basis of us bringing ourselves into it. When you talked often earlier about being a social worker and the cultural sensitivity or cultural humility that I like to call, is that I am Caribbean of African heritage, and I am proud. Over COVID, I made a point of trying to find out where I am, and I'm hoping this year to go to Cameroon, because that's where my DNA says where I am. But I have been in situations where people, as you say, are judging a parent based on a white Eurocentric way of parenting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was raised by a mum who said, you can't go to bed with no food. She could be quarrelling with you or whatever, you've got to eat your dinner before you go to bed. And at the time when I was growing up, white people sent their children to bed with no food. That was their punishment. And they, nowadays, will chastise, literally, Caribbean or African parents for physically chastising their parents, and I'm not for anybody out there saying that's the right course of action. However, I'm always thinking about who, in terms of the Children Act, who says emotional abuse is harder or easier than physical chastisement.
Yeah.
You have to understand the culture. You know, if we understand where physical chastisement comes from, that's white people in slavery. They gave that to our parents, and our parents, our foreparents, were trying to keep their children safe, and they will say, "Come behind me, stop hitting, don't do that, so the master don't save you." Yeah, and we've acquired that way of keeping our children in check because we know the society that they're coming into, and now we're being penalised. I grew up at a time, and I went to an all-girls school, but the neighbouring boys' school, they used to get caned by their teachers. Yeah, and now all of a sudden we're now chastising parents and putting children on child protection plans for physical chastisement. Now, I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying, why don't we get alongside our parents and talk about how can we do it differently? Yeah,
because that's the thing, isn't it? Because I'm still a parenting practitioner, and you can't really go in and say to people, right, don't hit your children. If you hit your children, this is what's going to happen, because you need to give them an alternative. What's the alternative? What are you going to do instead of?
The naughty step, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all kinds of things that. And so many things change. Yeah, we can't even do that. Yeah, we can't even do that though. It's time out. You take time out if it's that.
We'll time in now.
Yeah, we'll time in. Remember the corner used to be put in the corner, go and face the corner, stand with your hands on your head. There's all kinds of things that we went through, and you're quite right. Name calling. Because you know that song, "Sticks and Stones Will Break My Bones, but Words Don't Hurt." That is so not true, right?
Listen, sticks and stones can, words can rock you up. Sticks and stones, you get healed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I suppose, I mean, I've got 2 children, well, they're adult children, and working in a prison made me really realise that no matter what I understand about the black male experience, I don't know enough. Yeah. So when my son came along, I was a real strict mom, because there ain't no way that you're landing in prison, and from my parenting. So I was really firm, and then I'll have people saying, maybe you're a bit too firm. But I stand here and my son is a lawyer. Because I was firm. Because they don't understand what it means to be a black boy. And that kind of naughty step and, you know, reasoning. No. When I say jump, say how high until you are equipped to understand what it means to be outside. So I've had to teach my son, when the police stop you, as they are going to, not if. Don't waste your time arguing with them. Say, "Officer, do you want to see my particulars?" Because they're entitled to stop you. We might say we don't like it, but they will find some reason that it's okay. And when we rile up, our boys get arrested and they spend a night in a cell. I don't want that for my son. I want him to know how to play their game. And the game is, do you want my particulars? And my son will tell you, as soon as he says that, keep it moving, because they know he's not that person.
Do you know, the thing is, I'm going to be a bit devil's advocate-ish, because the hope that our boys are not going to get stopped, like I said, likelihood they are. Now, for me, both of my boys would be stopped. They're both of different temperaments. So it could go either way. But sometimes there are scenarios, or some may say that there are scenarios where they do all of that, the stuff that you've told them to do, and somehow they still find a reason for it to be different. The other thing, as parents, some of us have been fortunate enough to say, my child has never experienced whatever. But there is something to be said about the fact that we raise our children in our homes, but then they go outside of that. And there are things that happen to them outside of that isn't anything to do with us. That then takes them off the... Because even the things that happen, you know, the school, is it school to prison pipeline? The things that happen in school, the things that are said and done to our children in school, they're more likely to probably be excluded or permanently excluded. Then there's nowhere for them to go, etc., etc. Kind of sounds like a different show, but it isn't. But that is why parents like yourself, because you've been in the system, I've been in the system. When I worked in Holloway, I remember somebody saying, I've never ever been in trouble before until I met this individual, and now I don't have my children, and now, etc., etc. So that may have been somebody who came from a household that was wonderful and great, and blah, 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 and then she met an individual who wasn't quite right, and her whole life changed. And so I often have a very soft spot for our children that have received those difficulties, those scenarios that they end up in. Because you and I know what the system is like when we're in. And so that is the fair. So thank you. So you raised your boys in a way that I guess came down from the raising of your mother. So we're back to legacy. Your mother told you a few things. You held that. You spoke about your brother. You spoke about just not settling. That's me. I'd go and do a couple of nights in A&E and say, "What has your address changed since the last time you were here?" Because I'm not going to be in a place where I don't want to be. So I think that is why I say about strength, because to fight a system, although we might not know it, we might say something, you've got to have some strength. And we have lots of conversations like this, but what's great about you is that we've not just had the conversation, you have now introduced. Is it a method? Is it a thought process? Tell me a bit more about it. How would you describe it? I was trying to work it out.
Yeah, first I'm going to say I've got a boy and a girl because my daughter might listen and she said, if I don't correct, so it's a framework. Okay, because some organisations have started using it without the fullness of the book. Mm-hmm. So it's a way of thinking about how you make your decisions. It is a model as well, that if you follow X, Y, and Z, it's not a perfection sort of like you will always be there, because it depends on how you answer the questions at a certain point in your life. But it's really about understanding self and understanding what you bring in the place of truth. And you talked earlier about trust.
Yeah.
And you have to trust yourself enough to say, I'm questioning myself, and that we're not always right. Mm-hmm. And often we start from a point of view that I'm right, somebody else is wrong.
Sure.
But their right or wrong depends on how they were raised and what experiences they had in terms of their right or wrong. So my children will often say to me, Mum, why don't you say, or you close down? And I'm somebody who I will say to you if you invite me, but I'm not going to put my stuff onto you if you are not ready to hear that or open to thinking about it. I'm quite an observer of people, and so I could say, my spirit don't tell me to do that, or you to do that, but if you're going to say to me, I'm going to do it anyway, then I'm going to allow you to do that, because it's not my right to impose my thoughts on you, but it really is as a methodology to sort of say to you, think about what you bring to a situation, because none of us come to any situation blank.
Absolutely. So can I ask you, the book is not yet launched, right?
It is.
Oh, it is launched?
Absolutely.
Oh, you're having a launch coming up?
I am having a launch, but it was published last month.
Okay, so it's published, but the launch hasn't. Okay,
yes.
Cool, so I got that right. So, what feedback have you had about this framework so far?
Well, to be honest with you, when I wrote my PhD, a professor colleague of mine read it, and he said to me, Arlene, you need to write a book. And he's the one who did the foreword of it. And then I thought, okay, let me write this into a book. But along the way, I've published quite a few journal articles, and I've delivered conferences on this before I wrote the book. And it's always been well received in terms of thinking. I think it's interesting to me, a lot of my white colleagues, a bit like Crenshaw, Kimberly Crenshaw's idea of intersectionality, like it because it's not rooted in race.
Right.
So it's more palatable.
How do you feel about that?
I won't finish. I think it's very interesting, that I am a black woman writing about values and ethics and belief systems, which is very rooted in my race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's race. Well, I shouldn't say blanketly, but for me, it's race first, and then everything thereafter.
Absolutely. I say to people that when I walk into the room, and you asked again about me being a doctor, and this is a shout out to my colleague Chantel, because she's one of the people who always say, you must say that you're a doctor. I struggle with that because I am Arlene Weeks, working class lady, and the doctor is something that I'm trying to wear.
Tell me what you struggle with. I just want to kind of understand.
I struggle with that because I don't want to distance myself from my people, and sometimes people think when you're a doctor that I've had students think that I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth because I'm a doctor now, and they don't understand the journey to becoming a doctor. And it's a lot of black women have said to me, Arnie, you did it for us. Now, I'm being honest, I wanted to go and live in America, and I didn't want to train again, so I was like, okay, I'm going to get my doctorate. But I understand the importance for black women, black men to see a doctor. I had a student, and big shout out to Jerry, who cried at the end of my lectures with her. Cried, she's in her 36 years, she's never had a black teacher before, and what I bought. And so now I own it, even if I don't always feel comfortable saying it, is because it's important for my people.
Yeah, I do understand both sides of it, because I actually don't remember. Some of it might be menopause though. I don't remember the letters that I have after my name because they're actually not something that I use. I don't remember what all of them are. But I guess sometimes when we're trying to be in a particular, we're going in a particular place around a particular table, then it might. So
it's absolutely important when I'm in with white people company.
So I
come with I am Dr. Weeks, and you say I'm Dr. Weeks because you always want to belittle the knowledge I know. Yeah. So when I'm in that circle, please remember my name is Dr. Arlene Weeks. Yeah. Because I think there is something that you play their game, which is they like titles, they like positionality more than the intrinsic knowledge that I've got from my heritage. They want a title, so I'm going to give you a title. Yeah. And also, as you said, black comes first. When I walk in the room, they don't see me as Dr. Weeks. They don't even see me as a manager. They see me, maybe I'm the cleaner.
And
that still happens.
In all honesty, that is a thing that has happened. They don't there are scenarios where I think it's even Dawn Butler. Big shout out to Dawn Butler. She said yesterday. I think she even tells a story of when she was in Parliament that they kind of thought that she should be somewhere else.
Absolutely.
Or should be, in the cleaner. She should be cleaner's quarters. And I remember being at Tavistock also, and feeling that kind of sense of, oh, bingo's over there. Like you are in the right room, right? Okay. So it's that kind of thing, and it's about.
Can I interrupt you by saying that's such a real example I have. Probably about 20 years ago, my son needed braces, and our dentist referred us to a private because he didn't do braces. And when I am not suited and booted up, I'm a tracksuit and baseball cap. That's why I could identify with it. And I went in there, went and saw the dentist, and there was lots of pictures on the wall. The ones that the government going to pay for, and the one you have to pay for privately. And as luck would have it, I got paid for mine. And I came upstairs because my son needs braces. And the receptionist this is how the narrative went. Do you need to think about it? No. Do you want to pay by credit? No. Do you want to think about it? No. Do you want to put a payment plan? And I had not gone in to pay for it all, in one go, because I didn't know. But the sheer audacity of it, I took out my debit card and I paid for it. Because I could pay for it. But I just thought the audacity of you, that I've got more qualifications than you and more in a high position, and you're telling me as a receptionist, where you didn't ask me the question in the kind of I really want to know is that you are assuming I can't pay for that, or particularly women, if I have to get on the train, that you're snatching your bag. And I always say to my students, and they'll laugh at that, on a bad day, I'm going to tell you I earn more money than you. In a good day, I'm going to ignore it. Because just because we stand in our blackness, you are going to assume what knowledge we have, what job we have. Well, you wouldn't do that to a white person. And that's really important for me. In terms of my book, it was an opportunity for me to talk to the values that I bring. And you see that I start with African heritage. And the African philosophers that aren't taught in the textbooks of social work or any other profession, because they come up with these ideas and they think that it's rooted in Eurocentric views, when black people were telling you about that. Like Fan Topping is somebody that we get taught in social work about active listening. He wrote about that thousands of years before any white Eurocentric person came and told us about these principles that we should adopt.
And it's part of that kind of feeling of why I need to be working in the community. And I've been asked several times to be a counsellor, but I understand that I would be out of Parliament in 2 weeks because my personality doesn't lend itself to that. So I have to do the work in the community, which is why today's show is so wonderfully important, because it is about race first, it is about community, it is about legacy. So guys, if you've just tuned in, I've completely got carried away with our first guest, but today's show is entitled The Legacy, and the quote goes simply like this: when you learn something from people or from a culture, you accept it as a gift. My first guest today is Arlene Weeks. She allows me to do surnames as well, otherwise it's just simply Arlene. But she has a wonderful background of over 30 years experience in social work, the social work profession, and she's held many roles, including working as a probation officer. She's also spent some time in prison, but of course as a worker. So I dragged that out for a bit. She's done foster and adoption panels. She also says, like me, a race first, and she's got this new framework. It's EPPJ, and it is effective personal and professional judgment in social work. And I absolutely love it because it dares to challenge, and as I say, sometimes we just got to have the audacity, and Arlene certainly has that. Arlene, what would you like people most to know about this framework? If there's something you could say, the thing I want you to know most about this is?
I would probably say is to own your own self and to be self-aware about what you bring into the decision-making arena generally, and that's to everybody, to students, social workers, to lecturers. I want to say broaden your scope of what you teach people in terms of their awareness of other cultures, other positionalities, so much so that you are not teaching a Eurocentric way of doing social work or any other business arena, because it could apply to health, etc. Is understand that people are coming with their own way of doing things, and that does not make it wrong. It just makes it different.
Nice. So Arlene, listen, of course, time is really up. We're going to play your song choice for today. I'm just going to check in with Big E, see if there's anything he wants to add to that.
No,
Wonderful.
Listen, I've just been, I was I listen, you know what I mean? But most of the questions I was going to ask, you've answered, because I was going to ask you what inspired you to write the book, and you dropped that in quite nicely. But where can you get your book?
Amazon.
Okay.
Routledge directly, but also I am having a launch where my co-author, as you can see, Denise Harvey, she's not able to be with us because she's in Ghana at the moment. We're doing a launch on Friday the 13th, so you can come along on Eventbrite and pick up a book and get it signed.
Where is it going to be held?
It's in Shepherd's Bush, Nubian Life Centre, because I have moved from Brent to Shepherd's Bush, for my life. Those are the two places that I've lived.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love when people come home, you know, because Brent is for me the centre, all aspects of it back then and now. It's my centre in terms of being here in the UK.
Can I read something, a sentence?
Oh, please do.
Right, because I just wanted to, in view of what you said about legacy. And so the acknowledgements say, and that's from Denise and myself, we say, we acknowledge with gratitude our foreparents, whose legacy of faith, wisdom and storytelling, grounded in African-centeredness, has been passed down through the generations. Their teachings have provided us with a foundation which we have intertwined with our Western education to create this book. It aims to support students and social workers in their careers, encouraging them to strive for integrity in their social work practice. It stands as a testimony to the principles and values instilled in us by those who came before us, and it is dedicated to those who come after us. We are humbled to share it with the world.
Fabulous. Arlene, who goes by no other name than Arlene. Listen, you've been a wonderful, wonderful guest. If I may, I'm going to play Redemption Song, my playlisty thing. I don't know. There's always a gremlin or two, and it looks like I've got a gremlin in the house today. But we will not be defeated, I don't think.
I asked you to play that one because Bob says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, and for me, that is about us really thinking about what are the messages that we who were educated in this country at some point, whether it be Africa or Caribbean under a UK system, have been taught things that are at its core wrong to our core.
Yeah,
Love
that's
it.
true.
And you know, Redemption Song, as we know, is not an old song, but you can hear it so many different times, and it can just get you in the seat of your soul, because that song is so powerful. So Arnie, we are going to play out with good old Robert Nesta Marley, and we're going to hope that, well, it is Come On Ancestors, bring the thing to play. That's it. Is it what's going on? It's not actually. Oh yes. No. I don't know. Let's see. We will not be defeated. Yeah, it's coming. Let's take that back slightly. So we're going to sound out the first part of the show with taking back to the beginning. There you go. Will not be defeated. Right, Mr. Ferrer, you're up next, my dear. Are you nice and relaxed? What a wonderful interview. You are my G. Because your thought processes are so similar to mine. I am unapologetically an African woman. And when I first started my locks, I literally set on them, right? I'd have them tied in a ponytail. I wouldn't wear my African fabric. I'd have my rings off and all that. And then one day I was like, you know something? My hair is down, my jewellery's going on, my colours are going on. They either want to employ me or they don't. And when I found myself in that, to me it was, I'll either have the job or I won't have the job. And if I don't have this job, this wasn't the job for me. Because you know, we can get all embroiled in trying to be. I mean, once I got the job, my locks was out, my rings got, I'd get in first. And now I don't do that. And I can't apologise for who I am, because it's innately who I am.
And that's why I wear these. Because when they ask me, I say, this is my Caribbean hand and this is my African hand. And you used to sell us with these. And I want them to remember.
Chalk Hill Community Radio Station. So let's talk show live with the girl Blaze and Big E. Oh my goodness, what a wonderful start we have had to today. There is never enough time. It always feels like I could do with a few more minutes with each guest. Our first guest today was Arlene Weeks. What a wonderful opportunity to spend time with somebody who thinks along the same lines as myself. Race first, she says, and her model, working model, is the effective personal and professional judgment in social work. How do the things that you think about, the things that you were taught when you were raised, how they influence the decisions that you make in your professional capacity, and how do you stay strong and grounded? Well, find out more because Arlene is going to be having a launch. If you want to hear some more about that, then message me here on 07956 548 781. That's 07956 548 781. That is also the number for you to text in today for our second part of the show. Now, generally as the anchor of any show, professionally it is the right thing to do to remain impartial. But it's interesting because our first guest was talking about how can we be of no judgment because we come with something. So this particular statement is quite emotive for me because I feel that I have been connected to it in some way, and so of course I'll do my best to be impartial, but I'm just putting the caveat now and this disclaimer now. If I don't manage to do that very well, it is because this is a community show and I'm very much a part of this community. So our next guest is somebody who much of you know from back in the day. This is a back in the day show. At least that's where we're starting. My next guest is Lawrence Fairham. He was born in a very familiar place to much of us, Park Royal in north west London. And he says that his education was the University of the Streets, where he gained invaluable life experience. There is nothing like lived experience. And his professional journey started in 1981 when he became the joint founder of HPCC, where he worked in his local community of Harlesden. So we're going to dive some more into that, but before I just want to say good afternoon to my next guest. Lawrence, good afternoon, how you doing?
I'm good, Blaze. Thank you for extending this invitation. It's been long awaited.
It's been long awaited, but we both had the same thought process this morning, didn't we? That, and this was individually, that nothing before its time.
Yeah.
And you know how often we meet people, and the right time is the time. Where, sometimes we meet people 2 years later.
Nothing before it's time.
Yeah, well, again, that's coming out. People have a thing of saying God and time, and I think of that as being, there is a thing about responding to things around us. And I think when it comes to time, it's good to kind of take a little step back.
Yeah. Because it's like the tune said, time is the master, but time could be a disaster if you don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Time doesn't govern your spirit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's the other way around, because we met some years ago with an instant connection. It was a dinner, it was round the table, instant connection. But I, you know, as I mentioned, a big shout out to members of your family who I know from school, Tracy, Pat, and to Raymond. So you and I met some time ago, and I spoke fondly about the fact that I was aware of you. And this was to do with kind of like back in the day. We're talking way back. Before we go to the actual topic for today, what are your fond memories? You were born in northwest London, good old central Middlesex. Tell us what your fond memories were as a young person, or any memories that you have.
I think, in all fairness, being born in Brent, northwest London, of course. For me today, when I travel in the physical space of Brent, it brings back a lot of emotional memories. Especially when you get to my age. I'm a late 50s child. We were the first generation that were born to the, let's say, the large immigration or immigrants that came to this country from the Caribbean. And we were also the first to encounter what it was like to go through a British school education. So yeah, there are lots of memories. It goes back to my childhood. I do a lot more today of what's called shadow work. For those who don't know, it's part of what's psychologists like Jung and various people. You learn about it in, you know, if you're studying, you're talking about some of the things that Arnie was touching on and speaking on very deeply. I was quite interested in what what she had to say. Values, ethics, moral values. We were brought up on those.
100%.
Yeah. They're talking about the household.
Yeah.
And how we grew up culturally.
Community strength and stuff like that. Yeah.
My father grew up without his blood father, should I say. Yeah. And that's not because he was a man who fought in the First World War. So I've got genes from African Caribbean who came to this country and fought in the First World War. I had no idea about this history while I was growing up. Why did my father tell me he would say, look, my dad didn't know his father, he died when he was about 3.
Okay.
The same man you're talking about. So it did perhaps wouldn't have made sense to us then. But as an individual who began to ask questions when you reach an age, as long as you know your father house, my dad used to say, I want money in the house.
And that's it.
So that's the household I grew up. And I know that a lot of us are familiar with the kind of cultural background. If you come from the Caribbean, there are similarities, regardless of where you come from. I know back in them days here, even among the Caribbeans,
oh, yeah, for sure.
there were differences.
Yeah.
But these, as far as I see it, I would read it as it's part of the conflicting understanding that we have about who we are as a people, basically.
Yeah.
I used to, for me it was like, I'm a Jamaican. Would be keen to be identified as born Jamaican and not British.
And identity is such an important aspect of who we are. And really the story you're telling is coming from that individual, the father figure from the World War I down to the father that said, I have one father and I ain't that. To now, saying when you were a 5-year-old, and talking about we'll walk through this manner because this is our grounding for that time, because this is where we ended up. What was sort of teenage? So you spoke about 5-year-old. What was your, Lawrence says, what was your memories of a sort of a young adult?
Blaise, before I came on this interview, I had a feeling that we were going to go into, which is good.
Okay, cool.
And I look forward to hopefully being invited again.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned some very interesting topics on the introduction. I'd love to be a part of some of those discussions when they occur, honestly. So I'm really encouraged by, what you do here. And the conversation, the talk show side of it. Because the conversation is what we need. And less of the music. And that's not music. I grew up with music in my, as a child again, gospel in the front room. And when I say gospel, Church of God of Prophecy. And I'm speaking, I can only speak of this from a real experience perspective, and you'll get it. Front room, so let's go to Drayton Road. Now we're familiar with the front room, so I don't need to go into that. That's the same thing. Front room, out of bounds, blue spot, grandma, whichever gram, with all the fancy thing and glasses and whatever. We grow up in that kind of house.
We're laughing because we've done an exhibition. We're laughing because we did an exhibition
on the front room.
That is still a good topic or a good point for opening discussion if you really want to get to the depths of the Caribbean child in the British Caribbean home. My father was a very proud man. When he came there, we were living in tenancies. But he very soon wanted to have his own. And you again, I must be careful not to not respond to your question and answer.
No, that's okay. We were just talking about being life as a teenager? You spoke about a young person.
The
like
teenage is a challenging one, because some of the things when you were speaking about social work and so on, we had, my family, and again this is because whilst you're in school, junior school, there were already signs coming from a family of, at that time, some of the siblings hadn't been born. I'm the first of 7.
Wow.
In this country. Mom, talking about age, she hadn't when she was 21. Dad and mom, age-wise, there's a 10-year difference. Dad is no longer with us. But all these things I've only began to contemplate very seriously, timelines and all of these, what it would have been like for a young 21-year-old to have left her family and home for thousands of miles to come here.
To a strange land.
To a strange land. And someone she knew in Jamaica, but they didn't have that kind of, they came from the same districts and they were familiar with families and so on. Dad grew up with other siblings. His father passed away, but he had his mum who he loved dearly, speaks of her very much, and all his brothers who grew up to another father, same mum, but they grew up lovingly. They speak of that quite funny. He was the older brother in the family, so we shared that in common. But as a teenager, Mom did her best to select our secondary schools very carefully.
That's what I was going to ask. What school did you go to?
She got me living in Brent, and by this time, our generation, first generation, my mother was already looking for the best schools she could find to send her children to.
Yeah.
She found the first choice was out of Brent.
Okay, right.
She never took herself, but she was already weighing up that I want my kids them to go to
school outside.
Where was that?
Yeah.
Look, it's a long story to say what happened, but she sent me, the first choice was St. Mark's in Fulham, which means traveling and all of that. Second was St. Augustine's in, so you get a little face, you're out of order, but there was still always a respect for your elders, regardless. You know, the idea of telling no. So by the time I was 24, life for me at that point, I won't go in details, but some of it is written. I'm in a place now where I'm documenting a lot of what I would love to say now, but it's actually I'm doing the work because I think that's what my call is now. But Leonard, our paths met again, hence the Harlesden People's Community Council.
Harlesden People's Community Council.
Which is the HPCC. We came from a similar kind of background, hence the local area, school even for Parkway. I did eventually end up at Winston Eye when I was 15. They changed the leaving age on my year when I was wanting to get out of school very quickly to get to work. Yeah. And there was a time when the leaving age was up to 15. Yeah. If you wanted to get out of school, you could leave school at 15. My peers, most of the people I walked, they were 1 year older than me. It just so happened that I had friends who were in the year above. They left 15. When I was looking forward, next year I'm going for work. They changed the school leaving age, so I had to do an extra. That was the biggest blow to me as a youngster, because I had no confidence in my early education. In actual fact, that played a crippling factor to the way I felt in my confidence and everything throughout those early years.
So does that mean from St. Augustine, you went to Wilson High afterwards?
No. There's another, I went to, so hence I mentioned social workers. They were then known as, please, just a moment. It wasn't social work.
We can come back to
We
that.
had some early years back in the
Yeah,
60s,
yeah,
70s,
something
what they
else,
used to call
yeah.
them then. So I had a social worker.
Yeah.
Male. Very rare were there any black
Yeah.
social workers.
That's
that I
right.
can remember. Or in any of those institutions or authorities
Mhm.
that I can remember in my time. So those are big differences. I was excluded from St. Augustine's
Mhm.
out of school for more than you would even believe. And ended up going back, but didn't last. And so I ended up going to a school in Surrey for about 3 years.
Okay.
Boys' school, Jewish headmaster, and that's where I met some of the friends that came from the area who were also going to that school.
Okay.
I won't go into too
Yeah.
much there, but
So
that's where my real education is.
You've done a lot of schooling then? A lot of,
Oh yeah,
a lot
definitely.
of different,
Yeah,
different
that's
schools.
where it happened for me. That was the school where I settled down. So it told me something wasn't working for me with these outside schools, and it wasn't so much that I wasn't a keen, learner. But if you didn't care for me the right way in the classroom, I was going to make a fool. And it wasn't that I was stupid. I come to look at that now in hindsight, with a bit more of a critical view from and that's what I mean about the shadow work. I see what I didn't see then,
Sure,
but
yeah.
I know what I felt, and I get more closely in touch with that now to try and make sense of it.
So Lawrence, let's bring you up to Bridge Park. It's described as having a multifaceted history, right? And initially it was a bus depot. It's in Stonebridge, it's a bus depot, and it was being transformed into something else, or it was closing down. Tell us the moment, tell us the starting of what is now Bridge Park, so we can kind of work out how we got to where we are and work out where we are now, because we know that there's a campaign, there's some challenges, and it's heartfelt because we're talking about race first. You've just told us an amazing story about aspects of your journey, and you'll say you're understanding it now through shadow work. And I want people to understand that Bridge Park isn't just a building. So talk to us about how you, Leonard, and everyone else got involved, and bring us kind of up to where we are now. We'll do it in stages, but how did it start?
Let's just take it back to a year I can remember. Because I think when we try and speak of our time, it's very hard to understand that it's like speaking to, there are audiences out there, I'm conscious that they're generations removed from anything like what it was like.
Yeah.
But 1981 is where I go back to. So that takes me through my teenage years and this beginning. Met up with Leonard, and we started that thing which you mentioned at the beginning about men speaking about things like health.
Yeah.
And do men talk about certain things? Well, Leonard and I, coming from the background that we did, it just so happened my younger brother was there as well, Ray. We drifted out of a party scene. It was a bit of a celebration for me because I'd just come out of Her Majesty's, what have you, pleasure.
Yeah.
And this is what we did among friends. When you come out, we greet you, welcome you back home. And for me, it was like, well, really want to get myself, I'd done a lot of thinking about where I was coming from and wanted to make a real serious change. It's never easy when you get back into the environment. No matter what the real challenge is when you get back in it. I was fortunate to be able to meet Leonard at that time because it just so happens that my deepest reflection was what he was sharing.
Yes.
And so talking about men talk, we got talking. Man, the life we was living. So we're looking back at our teenage years. We've got a lot we share in common. There are many of us around who also share a similar kind of experience. We're in Stonebridge. We could see the tall high-rise flats, which you now see in Wembley.
Yeah.
You look back, you're seeing high-rise now going
back again.
City of Wembley.
Yeah.
All that's knocked down.
Yeah.
But people lived in Stonebridge who today have moved on. They live in different locations, bought their own homes. But they lived in Stonebridge at that time, families who we know. even today, their children were growing up in Stonebridge. They were growing up. Now, I didn't grow up in Stonebridge, but I know Stonebridge.
Yeah.
I used to get my hair cut in Stonebridge in the precinct. Who, for those who didn't know, Mi Amigos, who was the hairdresser in Haas and became an entrepreneur, providing all our hair products. So he was located in Stonebridge in the precinct. I was one of the youngsters who sat in his chair in those early barber days after my dad started cutting our hair, and then it's like, hey, you need to go. But anyway, bringing the story up.
Just bring it a bit closer to the mic.
I was going to say this at the earliest, perhaps thrown a bit, I think, and taken by Arlene's story going first, which has really kind of got me more into the historic side. But if I didn't get this in, look, this campaign that's currently going on is a Save Bridge Bar campaign, which is a physical building, as you all know.
Yeah.
It's currently, it's Brent Council possession.
Yeah.
And when I say that, if you're talking about by law, under the legal framework, it comes under council's management and responsibility. However, behind the whole thing was an old bus garage that was vacant back in 1980s. The 1980s, just to get a sense of what the social, economic environment was like: recession, high unemployment, high crime, police conflict with particularly the African Caribbean youth of the time, my generation, leading up to what was called the inner city. I call them inner city uprising, not riot, because I don't think everybody that was out there was riotous people. They were expressing a concern for the way in which they were being treated as young people. That doesn't excuse my wrongdoing, but a lot of it was unjust as well, in terms of how we were handled as youngsters.
But I think the terminology is right, because it's an uprising, because it sounds better for others often to say it's just riot, we're just running around rioting, we're looting. But that's not really.
I correct that.
Yeah, so it's right.
Because for me, I went out there rioting. And a lot of the people I knew didn't just get up and say, we're upset and we want to tear down the place for nothing. Most people will exploit situations, they still do today.
Yeah.
People protest. Some of them come from a real position of concern. And whilst there are those, and even now, infiltrators can come in and upset a protest that has genuine, you've got these things that happen. So that was no exception at the time. And it didn't just happen in London, it happened around the country in our big cities. Now that, all the reports were done after the Scarman reports and all the reports, all the policies that formulated government for the 80s and the 90s came out of what happened as a result of those incidents. The police had to go back to the drawing board in terms of how they were dealing with young African Caribbean men on the streets who were picked up for sus and all sorts. So that's the climate. So we said, hey, we've got to do something about it here. We were looking at young people. I'm looking at the young generation, my younger brother, who I was thinking, gosh, man, you don't want to go down the road I went down. You know, when we go in places I just come from. But you could see these young men and women and growing up. And in a way, it wasn't entirely a social environment that doesn't have the provision or even excludes you from fair play. So whether you had the qualification or not, you weren't getting fair play. I didn't know that because I wasn't one of those who had a qualification. I was coming from the position of no school education, none of that. So there was always that little sense that I'm not going to have the same chances someone who did well at school is going to have. Always that little doubt in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
So for me, this was something that once you got talking that we're going to try and do something, it was coming from deep within your own consciousness that you want to do something. It wasn't.
So was the age 21, 22?
23.
23.
Yeah. 22, 23. That's when I would say I made a conscious decision to look at where I was going and having the conversation with a friend who came from the same kind of said, hey, you're thinking like that as well.
So Lawrence, collectively you set up HPCC, and you had an idea. You thought, I've been on a journey. I don't want my younger brother to go on that same journey. Something could be done here. You've met like-minded people, Leonard Johnson, etc., etc. And there is this misused or disused or about to close down premises, and you have this idea between you that you were going to take over that building. No? How did you get there?
I'll be quick. The building came available some 6 months into the summer of 81, I think it was. Mm-hmm. But we started on the estate in a small underground garage community centre. Mm-hmm. We call it the Annex.
Oh yeah,
it came under the Brent Youth and Community, which was in Brent at the time. Mm-hmm. I don't think you have one now, but
probably not.
There was a Brent and Youth and Community department that actually provided community centres. I mean, when I was younger, there were community centres,
sure.
and certain things to do. Scouts, and other things to do in the evenings. We had fun. When I was younger, we were out on the streets. We didn't have the technology we have now, so everything was outdoors and adventurous in that respect.
So the Annex was the core.
The Annex was the core place. That's where we said, right. Our first point of call was it was a bit like here, inside. If you imagine, it's a garage. No windows. What I did was we said, right. Then I said, well, we don't know. After our little chat one night, it was like, well, we don't know where we're going with this. It was just deep conversation about we need to change our ways. So we didn't sit down and come to some big plan about what we were going to do. It was just the first step was honesty and openness. And then what followed on from that was in the area was community workers that we didn't know at the time, but there was this Annex on the Stonebridge estate. But they didn't have anybody going into this building. It was empty. Like some of the buildings we have around the place now. Vacant. But they don't, what sort of activity or that would draw young people's interest. So they were out on the street on the estate. Some people were complaining, the police were complaining about crime, on the estate and so on. There were no back gardens. The estate was high-rise flats, and people went from,
That was a concrete jungle.
It was a concrete jungle. Anyway, so in that climate, we started these meetings at the youth centre. I went in. The one thing I learned to do when I did an apprenticeship in paint and decorating. So I said, well, I know how to do this. Let's get the gang together and start painting. Wow. So it was physical. As I remember it, it was get down into real work. We want to use this place, but it's criminal. Let's get some paint on it. So I began to, some young people out there or some of the people today may remember being part of that team of who were tidying up. It was painted bright yellow like that back there. And the idea was to try and create a scene that people will come and feel. And so we did. After a few weeks, people were now coming into the Annex. Some of the young mothers that were on the estate, I remember Miss Archery and a number of others. And please, I'm not going to mention names now because I'm going to miss out names. But there were lots of people on the estate were now becoming mobilized and interested in what we were doing, and the fact that we could get the young people to come into the set. Now, Leonard being who he was at the time, he was always an outspoken. So he was a leader by the mere fact that what I would say and what Leonard would say was he was the one, look, I was more shy and withdrawn, always in school. He was more extrovert. So what if I liked someone like Leonard, would you tell that person? He would just go say, hey, whereas I would be, whoa. So that was one of his strengths, and he didn't hold back on that. I've seen him and gained a lot of my if you like, outwardness from seeing him doing quite normal. That was one of his strengths. So I was grateful every time he stepped forward, but I was kind of like his right hand, if you like. At the time, I could just remember being there at all and learning rapidly, and nothing asking, if something happens to him, I'm going to have to talk. So you always challenge to learn, listen. So I did a lot, and I am a learner. I do listen a lot. I think when I go back, I think that's what I was like from an early age. Quite curious as well about things and want to know. Anyway, we got on from that. Within a few months, that summer, that was when we had the uprisings. Leading up to that. So we'd already started, almost like we could sense in the air that if we don't do something, something's going to happen. Well, it was already the feeling around the country in similar like cities, inner city areas. So we were no exception. We were just responding to that. What's going on? Something isn't, we need to be doing something.
So did you mobilise then? Because there's the talk that you were responsible for bringing down the temperature of something that was about to really...
Well, it got to boiling point on the night. I was in Brixton on that night, so I know what the riot was like. I was in South London, in a car, with someone driving in South London when the news came on saying, and you could hear the riot, or the sirens, riots. Well, at the time there was
that's what they were calling it,
police vehicles that came out, was all masked and ready. So investments have been made into the police in preparation for something. Whilst in Stonebridge, that night there was an event at the youth centre, which was now established on a Friday. The young people would come. One of the local sound system youth, we said, you bring your sound, play your team, bring in your boys, make sure you got, and give them responsibility. So it was voluntary, but it was like a test of getting them engaged and involved. So all through it, we knew this wasn't about doing for, it's about trying to engage the people whom we were saying that we want to, support. It's out of that we put ourselves forward and decided that we were going to form a council, a representative body. So all of that came out of the community. Our appointment wasn't self-appointment. We put ourselves up and said, look, we're coming with this idea, but we want to do it under a council that's governed, and you, the people, are going to determine. That's how HPC is.
So, do you know, I have to just say how in awe I am of that story every time I really think about it, because I mentioned the fact that I'm a mother of two sons, and I think if my two sons at that age, 21, 23, were doing that, how I would feel as a parent. And that story gets me every time, because you're very young, and that's your thing where I was talking about, you don't want to wear short trousers, right? You want to wear long trousers. You want to be grown up, and you want to do some grown up things. And something that you started with some yellow paint, as you said, your transferable skill, wherever you got it from, some yellow paint, a building that didn't have much going on, has now moved on to, although it's not in the same place, to this amazing premise that E still uses, more so than I do, but people want that building to remain in the hands of the community where it started. And you're a legacy because you're still around, and is it Delaney and some others are still around. This is the legacy. And today's story is that we're trying to hold on to this space that isn't just a building. We're trying to hold on to the story, to the legacy, and for it not to be taken away from the community. So how did it get to this point? How did we get here?
Well, we obviously had to go through a whole load of campaigns to actually convince the authorities that that building was a building that could be used for community purposes. So that again is
You even went abroad though, didn't you? You went abroad.
Gosh, this is what I mean. Going abroad started, my first abroad was Brussels. And it was to make the first appeal to the EEC, the European Social Fund. I'd never traveled before. I never even went on a school journey.
A school trip.
You know, some of them did Switzerland. I never done any of those. So this is first time on a plane. And it came, for me, and I have to say, this was like, wow, what's going on here? You come out of school, you ain't got no qualification, you never traveled here. And now,
You're in Brussels.
for a purpose that you've willed and had some involvement with, you're now going to Brussels. Now that came about because the authorities, by this time, we were now talking bus garage, which was up for sale, and the monies were got. It was purchased by the GLC, who owned the building at the time. All the London Transport, bus garages and so on came under that was one of their sort of, that would come under their commercial properties portfolio. So we were able to persuade, the idea was, would you take it off the open market? Because it was up for sale. And give us a chance to raise the money to get this place. Now, that was the audacity. And I don't know where it came from. Like I said, we didn't come from no so-called expert qualification background. These were just, if you like, vision and insight and a sense that this is what we're going to do. The idea of intuition, well, just being intuitive and taking the brave step. So Leonard was our spokesperson. The council by this time, all the officers and the leaders and so on, said, we're going to go to Brussels because we've got a case here. We're going to try and start raising some of that money for this building that's now being purchased for 1.8 million. Purchase price, finally. And it was now the question was, what are you going to do with it? For me, that was the biggest. It's like, look what we've done in 6 months.
Wow, was that the period of time?
But we weren't watching that at the time. We were just getting on with addressing our local community challenges. We had the Brent show leading up to that, right? Where we had stalls. I remember going, it was just pure, raw, entrepreneurial. And I'm saying it now without any kind of reservation. I went out and did what I knew best, what we'd already known, but on the streets, right? Buy and sell. If our youngsters are on, and they say they're causing trouble on the estate, stealing, what have you, and the police, we're saying, all right, well, we knew that if you're going to tell them to come off the street, you better provide an alternative.
Have something for them to do.
You can't just say come off the street and come and do what? So for us, it was rapid that we were on to the authorities and saying, you need to put some new tennis tables in here. The place had nothing. It was run down. They expect us to go in, but okay, give us some revenue to start doing something. Well, what we put down within those, before Bridge Park, was 7 days a week programming in a small youth club. We had a Sunday school, which is traditionally known to happen in a church building. Right? And one of the young people today who's working in the community still, it was his mother that was the one who came and said, I'll come and go on Sunday school. And she done it. It was on a Thursday, it was Black History class. The first Black History book I ever read was by Chancellor Williams. And it was introduced by the history teacher that we got from Tottenham or North London that came a few hours a week to teach Black history in this youth club. All of this happened before Bridge Park. So I'm saying Bridge Park wasn't handing on a plate. As the authorities saw that these young people were quite serious. They got into a little space and they maximized the use of it. By that time, we started to ask for the use of another building that was on the estate called the Hilltop Club. Now the Hilltop Club had quite a history for those who know about that. We had talent shows there. Some of the artists who came out of ours and in later years became professional artists. They were at that talent show. We had the local musicians and artists and so on. We had dance classes and all sorts. So again, we were filling up spaces for young people to come in and utilize the spaces. And before we knew it, we had need for care, childcare. We had need for classes that would provide some of the things that people said, we'd like to have some dance classes, choreography, da-da. So that's what we did. And the people that were coming forward were volunteers from the community who said, I could do a dance class, or I could do. So with all of that, the council took us very seriously that summer. We then, they then said, we need to find whatever resources it is now for you to expand this growing initiative for the coming years, so that it provides something very seriously for the estate that was left deprived or was developed without any amenities for social provisions on the estate.
Because at that time, Lawrence reminds me, I know there was a time when both Stonebridge and Chalk Hill were given names that were not of a positive nature, the most lawless, the most... Was it around that time that Stone didn't have a great name given, a great given name? Was it that era? Or was it before? Can you remember?
Yeah, that was like...
You know what? Stonebridge, if I remember, came before Chalk Hill. They all got built up around a certain time, but the estates had a stigma.
They had a stigma, yeah. A stigma.
You come from them estate, you don't want to even... You know, if you don't want to announce you come from it. You know, if you went for a job, just the fact that you come from where might jeopardize you. So it had a stigma.
Because we were told, you know what I mean?
And the stigma.
I used to be in Kempton Road, we were told, you lot better don't go Stonebridge or don't go Chalk.
Yeah, so yes, it had the same stigma. And other places, it latter, you know, St. Raffles and other places, which were more newer estate developments and weren't as tall high-rise. They too started to get a bad, you know, and you hear of what happened for the generations that came out from there in latter years. But we didn't have gun, we didn't have the kind of drugs that we had out on our streets in the 90s and 20s. That was what
then they were saying.
we was trying to avoid, because we were always looking at whatever happens in America, you give it a usually we're tailing behind.
Yeah.
But we're gonna
it's gonna come. It's gonna come.
So there were things that we were hearing about from Compton and places like that, which we did visit as part of this Bridge Park development. About some of the things that were happening there that we now see, or we then later saw on our streets here.
Right. So guys, listen, let's bring it right to current day, because there is something quite emotional happening right now. So some years ago, I got a call from Hawkeye Records, big shout out to Hawkeye. He's like, ladies, you know, we need some support. There's a meeting in Bridge Park, and there's a concern that we could lose the building. I went down, joined Leonard's and some others for many of Fridays. We saw day turn to night. We had food, came back, went off, came back and tried to, you know, make the difference. What I want to know now, Lawrence, because myself and Big E went to the event that you guys, was it Euston?
Yeah.
We had in Euston. And we missed much of it. Who has the building? Who does the building belong to? Because I say the building, but we're not talking about a building. We're talking about all of what you've just said from the start of the show to now. We're talking about the yellow paint. We're talking about the time when the riots or uprising was changed. We're talking about a legacy. We're not really just talking about a building, although the building cannot go. I was present at the Blue Plaque launch, with the Blue Plaque for recognising the work that the late Leonard Johnson has created. Big shout out to Sarita and little Leonard and baby Leonard. What's happening now? Have we got the building? Is it going to be not listed, registered? Have we still got a chance to have this building, or is it going to be taken down? Do you know?
All right, that's the reason why I'm here. Look, we don't own the building. Although some would disagree with me on that, they say it's our building. But as far as I'm concerned, every building in this land, you have to purchase it in one way or another, have your deeds or title to say it's yours. We don't have that. But if you're talking about sweat and blood and moral, you know, real investment in terms of time, sweat, equity, or even a vision to make it possible that it's there for an investor today having an interest in wanting to have it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been there.
Sure.
Had it not been for a vision to convert an old transport bus garage into a sports complex.
Yeah.
So the issue today is that there's been many battles since it was, since its opening officially with Royal. Again, that was another thing. We said that this thing is going to be before it was. We're going to open this place and royalties coming to Stonebridge. This was the kind of bold announcements we would make way ahead of the time. So those kind of things kind of keep you going because you think you said it, you're going to have to stick with it. So all of that worked in our favor in a way in terms of our own drive. Today, what you have is, I would say, another campaign out of a number of campaigns. The last one you're probably most familiar with is the one that went through the courts.
Yeah.
That was hundreds of thousands of pounds spent for legal court hearing about whether Bridge Park should be, with Brent and so on. So Leonard invested a whole lot in his latter years prior to in that whole thing. And it didn't quite work out in our favor. I would say in the community's favor, because for me, it was always about, if you invested in that, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
But even the purpose in which the building was bought for and the monies that was given by the authorities was that this should stay in perpetually as a community building. But as time's gone on, political interests have changed. It's not the same Brent Council. Brent Council as a building is still there, but I've got no opposition with Brent. I'm not here to be in opposition with Brent or even to encourage the people to get into this kind of. I'm more encouraged to get behind knowing that this building has a history. Get to know it. I didn't come here to talk about the history because I know it's pretty well documented. And there's a lot that's been said about it that's been done by mainstream, hence the reason why I'm documenting it from a first person narrative view, which I don't think has been done yet. So I admire book writers of our time as well coming forward and telling the story. So what we have...
Is there anything only because we're closing this time, is there anything that the community can do to support the campaign of the building, the legacy remaining as, I don't know, is it a registered building? What is there anything we can do? What is the campaign if there is one?
I'm only sorry. I was hoping that when I came on, the first thing I would have liked, and we'll do that, right, is to, the campaign is pretty well documented.
Okay.
So what I would like for the viewers and listeners is, as usual, there's reference and links now that you can go and see what is going on.
Yeah.
You can see the dates that we're awaiting now for the application for listing. If you have an old building, you've heard of historic England, and you've heard of heritage sites, for example. So old buildings or old stocks, they come under their listing. It means that this building can't be used for, you can't knock down this building because it's got historic value. It's a similar thing. Someone's come up with the idea, a young person,
academic, wasn't it?
Who wants to, he's interested in the whole thing about heritage sites and thought, let's look at community sites or projects that's been developed over the years that might fall into that category. And she found in her research these people from ours and who did this project, and that's how that happened. So it's someone out there.
Quite a random person in a way.
But I believe in them synchronicities. That's what kind of took us to where we are. You just got to look out for them and know when they are the time that says this is a time, this is interesting. So that's what's brought me back into the fold. Apart from that, it is another opportunity, if you like, to do your utmost best to ensure that something is not forgotten.
Yeah.
That it was as important as the efforts that were made from our, and I'd say you might focus on our generation, me and Leonard representing that, but you're talking about our parents' generation and what they laid down prior. I can't see that what we did had no reference or no legacy that we can really say yes. And the Bridge Park project is more than just a building.
And that's the point. That's the point. Because the other thing we talk about, which is why I wanted the story, because I don't think we're talking about the building as in bricks and mortar. It's the story. It's the legacy. It's that, and that's why it's important for you to tell your story, because all of those stories make up our history. All of those stories are the legacy that we're going to tell our children and our grandchildren. Big shout out to Tony Sweeney. He says, excellent. Stonebridge Estate was also known as the no-go area. I actually lived in Prothero House block and worked at the bus garage as a bus mechanic before it closed down. And Lawrence is spot on, so big shout out to Tony Sweeney. He also speaks about the fact that he recalls Leonard on the TV shaking hands with Prince Charles whilst he was attending the complex. There's another message here from Brother Omwale. He says, Tenemari, my brother Lawrence, is saying legendary works by you and your team that will never be forgotten. And the book by Chancellor Williams was Destruction of Black Civilization. And we actually sold many of those books. I used to sell books, and Omwale is always really good at remembering the names of the authors. So listen, this is why it could be a two-part. But what I do want to invite you to do is that there is some work that I think we should do in terms of you being a part of some of the things you've mentioned, and looking at kind of how we continue the legacy, our legacy. It's race first, and how do we do that? But we are, of course, out of time, so I just want to find out from you if there are any final words, and I'm going to
I'd just like to ask everyone to look at, there's been a recent Instagram page dedicated to the campaign.
Fantastic.
So what I haven't covered, and this is why I was probably more keen to just have the conversation, but at the same time I'm here to give some fact update.
Yeah.
You can get all of that details on the Instagram page, which is online. Forgive me because I haven't.
Okay, why don't you do that?
I'm going to find posted for everyone to check out. But on that, we'll give you the dates of when the listed application will be submitted to the Secretary of State, which is coming up sometime in June here. There's a number of support letters that have been written to support the campaign listing, and there are some MP who is actually named again in the English historic heritage committee decision makers who are making recommendations based on what is in the application. The application picks up on the things that we consider important to consider when you're going to decide whether this building should be listed. Now, Brent has also got their which is not what I'm here to talk about, but Brent is also, the building is up for, as you know, it's part of a development plan for the local area. That's already a done sort of effort, but at the same time, there is so
there's that. There's an opportunity for the consultation. Lyndon Wishart said, great show, well done to all involved. He went to a wedding reception at Stonebridge many years ago. He also acknowledges the Instagram page, which I've just read out, which is Instagram Save Bridge Park. Have a look, join on there. So is there any kind of petition? Is there anything on there that can do with
this?
Yes,
there is a petition there too that can be found. Actually, it's interesting to see at short notice how people have responded to that petition, and you just think sometimes you can go down the route. Brent, we're not fighting against Brent. We need to get on with community business. For me, it wasn't about fighting against Brent when we started. It was about organising our community to do for ourselves. And it's still the game, as far as I'm concerned, that we set about sorting out our own business. The sooner we do that, everything else we will attract.
Yeah.
Money didn't come first. We weren't put off by the fact that this building would cost us. It was more about a vision. You're driven by your idea. Everything else follows, as far as I'm concerned. And that is something I've seen happen through that experience. You know, if we start there thinking we need to have $1 million, we can't get this, we wouldn't get off the ground.
Yeah.
Let your vision drive you.
So, Lawrence, we are going to do some more to support the cause. After we're going to work out a way that we can make sure everyone has the Instagram page. We're going to share that here on the Chalk Hill Community Radio Station because it is, you know, it is a must, and we really need to be able to have an opportunity to do that. So, guys, listen, we are out of time. We haven't even got time to play Lawrence's song, but we are you glad? It looks like, oh my gosh. And after that, we have got, it was a Dennis Brown, wasn't it? And after that, we have got, it was a Dennis Brown, wasn't it? We have got the event.
Second choice.
What's it called?
Yeah.
Oh, what's your first choice then?
First choice was.
Was it Free?
Little Sims.
Yeah, is it Free? Let's see if I can find that.
Free.
Yeah, if I can find the radio version, because there was a non-radio version.
And then the other was a Dennis Brown for the
Let's see.
generation.
We can squeeze it in, but we'll be ending.
Any one of them will do if there's a chance.
Okay, this looks like. I'm hoping I don't have to just see if this is a clean version. Okay, so guys, in the meantime, between time it's your girl Blaze, and we're out.
Thank you.
See this. Okay, thank you guys. Yeah. Right, so we gotta pack up and move out.
Super. There's some interesting things going on in the studio here. You guys have got a nice little